So, the Chavez versus Gonzales GR number 168 February 15 of 2008. So, introduction. This video will discuss the 2008 case of Chavez versus Gonzales and generally the important issues in privacy, freedom of the press, and the public's right to information in the Philippines. The applicability of the anti-wiretapping law, RA 4200 as interpreted in this case, in cases where media organizations report on controversial recordings is duly examined herein. So this case involves the RA 4200 or the anti-wiretapping law and a very tense debate between privacy and freedom of expression. So for now, let's break down this case to understand the facts, issues raised, decision of the Supreme Court, and what valuable takes we can get from this ruling. So, so what is the case all about? The case is all about. So this case is originated from a call by government officials for media to desist from airing the so-called Hello Garcia tapes. These were tape recordings of alleged conversation between the President Arroyo and a Comelec official regarding the 2004 elections. Serious warnings against airing these tapes beg the question as to whether media had the right to air these recordings or are they limited by RA 4200. This case ultimately became a battle between the rights to privacy pitted against the freedom of the press. So, to begin with, a proper setting with respect to what this case is all about. In Chavez versus Gonzales, the former Solicitor General Francisco Chavez had challenged the acts of two hierarchical superiors, warning media outlets against airing a supposedly contentious set of tapes that were widely known as the Hello Garcia tapes. So, allegedly, private conversation between then President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo and Commission on Elections official persuading each other over election matters. So this case involved integrating questions of balance between government authority, freedom of speech, and the application of RA 4200, otherwise known as the Anti-Wiretapping Law, which prohibits unauthorized recording and dissemination of private conversations. So does this extend to the media entities who themselves did not participate in the recording? This case squarely put before the court the issue of whether warnings from the government against the airing of these tapes were constitutional or otherwise amount to censorship. So, what are the facts of the case? So, the facts of the case: the Hello Garcia tapes were wiretap recordings for purportedly purposely containing a conversation between President Arroyo and a Kamala commissioner regarding election results manipulation. Government officials invoking RA 4200 warned media that airing such tapes may be unlawful. Against this warning, a motion was filed by Francisco Chavez, a former Solicitor General, on the ground that such was a restriction on press freedom in violation of the Constitution. This set up a this set up a Supreme Court decision on how the law applies to media rights. So it was during this period that, in the early 2000s, recordings surfaced of purposely accepted conversation between President Aro and the Common Commissioner Virgilio Garceliano, pointing to possible election fraud in the 2004 presidential election that stirred up widespread public interest. So, as media began reporting on the tapes, the then Secretary of Justice Raul Gonzales and NTC issued warnings on the media. They sensed that it may amount to violation of RA 4200 or the anti-wiretapping law and threatened sanctions against media outlets. Filed in opposition was a petition by Francisco Chavez on the ground that these acts involve an infringement of freedom of the press and the public's right to know. Chavez reiterated that such acts reflected the government's efforts at censorship to prevent the media from airing any information that was vastly of public interest. The statements by the officials, he argued, rose to the level of prior restraint unconstitutional action against the media even before their chance to broadcast the tapes. So, the issues of the case. What are the issues of the case? The main issues here are whether or not the warning from the government to the media amounted to an infringement of freedom of the press, and whether or not RA 4200 applies to media that did not actually produce recordings. These issues, for the first time, forced the court to address whether privacy laws can be used to prevent the press from reporting on matters of public interest and ultimately how to balance privacy with the public's right to information. So this brings up to the key issues presented in the case. So the main issues were here. So were freedom of the press and public rights to information compromised or in any way impinged upon by government officials through threat of sanctions to the media. So the second one is that RA 4200, better known as the anti-wiretapping law, applied to media entities broadcasting a recorded conversation that they had no participation in the actual recording of such conversation. So, so what is the ruling of the Supreme Court or the decision? So the Supreme Court ruled that the government's warning against broadcasting the tapes were unconstitutional. It established that media does have a right to inform the public, particularly on issues that affect the public interest, and explained that RA 4200 does not apply to mass media which do not make the actual recording of conversations. The decision thus upheld freedom of the press, allowing mass media to air newsworthy items without unreasonable government interference. So the decision given by the Supreme Court was landmark. They decided that they decided the case in favor of Chavez and convicted the government officials for acting unconstitutionally. The court, however, explained that this constituted a prior restraint on the part of the government to stop the airing of the tapes and therefore amounted to an infringement of freedom of the press and the public's right to information regarding a matter of grave public concern. The court there stated that the news media in the Philippines alone enjoy the highest degree of protection. Hence, the public sense in its reporting activity must be supported by a substantial government reason. As the court applied RA 4200, it explained that the evident intent contained in said law is for protection afforded to the individual against unlawful recordings. So in this case, however, the various media outlets were not responsible for the making of the recording. They were simply recipients and sought to report on the contents of the tapes. The court held that to apply RA 4200 under the circumstances would be too broad and militate against the interest of serving the public through the media. Thus, RA 4200 does not apply to media outlets broadcasting information they did not record. So, in the end, the ruling of the Supreme Court was to favor transparency and freedom of the press and that media should not be restricted in matters of public concern without substantial justification. So, what are the takeaways in the case? So, the case reinforced that one's freedom of speech, specifically of the press, must be upheld. It also further established that there are limits to RA 4200 indeed. Information can be shared by the media that they themselves did not record. More importantly, it asserts the right of the public's correct to know on issues affecting their interests in society, even if there is an intrusion into one's privacy. On the whole, this case sets a very important precedent with regard to the protection afforded to media freedom and clarity with respect to how such privacy laws are applied. So, the takeaways of Chavez versus Gonzales. So, the case provides some necessary guideposts in the area of freedom of the mass media, the right to privacy, and the operation of the RA 4200. For the first one is the freedom of speech and of the press. So, one of the major points to be taken from this case is a reiteration of freedom of speech and of the press in the Philippines. The decision underlined that any act of the government constituting interference with the reporting by the media, particularly of public issues, should be subjected to strict scrutiny under the Constitution. So, second one is the limits of RA 4200. The case clarified that the reach of RA 4200, confirming that it does not apply to media outlets broadcasting tapes they did not record. This distinction avoids the usage of RA 4200 in the improper limitation of the present, ensures that also the media entities may report information they receive in good faith without any punishment. So the third one is the balance of interest and privacy with public interest. So while RA 4200 is an act of state protecting the individual's privacy, yet the court balanced the same with the need for public accountability, where information is of sufficient impact on the public. The right to be informed may override certain individual privacy interests, especially when such information was not illegally obtained by the media themselves. For the last one, the impact on the future cases. So this judgment has set an important precedent confirming that any government actions to be taken in due respect to constitutional rights. Cases relating to privacy, freedom of speech, and the rights of media in the future will most likely refer back for guidance in the Chavez versus Gonzales on how to balance these complex interests. So the conclusion. So the Chavez versus Gonzales case was one that enumerated landmark changes in media freedom in the Philippines. It affirmed that such laws as RA 4200 should not be used to restrict press coverage of public matters and underline the vital role which a free press plays in a democratic society. By protecting the right to share and access information, this ruling strengthens democracy and holds government accountable. So, in fine, the Chavez versus Gonzales proved to be a very important case as far as media rights and privacy laws are concerned in the Philippines. The case epitomized the court's role in protecting constitutional freedoms and made it clear that as important as privacy is, the freedom of the mass media to inform the public cannot be unduly hampered. This case reminds the state and the citizens of the importance of having a free but responsible press in the democratic society. So, thank you for watching my midterm.